Who wants to learn about how Michel Foucault was a pedophile?
Pro homo, no POMO. Gender busters at Flying Gender on Twitter.
Is this what we're doing now? Are we being this? So, I'm pretty excited. There's this Australian socialist who goes by the name of Bad Empanada on YouTube and social media.
Who wants to learn about how Michel Foucault was a pedophile?
And I've been subscribed for a while, but he's part of BreadTube. So it's always this kind of complicated relationship, I guess we'll say. But the thing that he does best is videos on Latin America in particular. And I think he's like lived in Latin America and he speaks Spanish and he has a Spanish language channel and stuff. Yeah, all that kind of stuff seems pretty okay and good. So that's basically why I'm subscribed to him. But I see who he's friends with and I have been waiting for him to do a video on trans, but because his channel's not really devoted to that, he hasn't really touched it. But apparently he's like, comrades with Thought Slime.
Point of personal privilege.
Yes.
Please do not use gendered language to address everyone.
Thank you, comrade.
So he did a video critiquing someone, like, what happened? Okay, so there's this guy called Caleb Maupin, and he is a Stalinist, basically. I haven't really paid much attention. His vibe doesn't gel with mine, but he apparently interviewed some other similar communist, I think. She was secular when it comes to gender theism, or as the believers would call it, transphobic. So Bad Empanada was doing a video where he was righteously taking down Caleb, and the point at which I burst with excitement was early on in the video. The speaker basically says, like, it's anti-materialist.
We're not against a trans person. It's the ideology that's being pushed on people that says you are what you think you are. Now, this is total idealism. Idealism in the philosophical sense of the opposite of materialism. It says, I think, therefore I am.
And then Bad Empanada comes back with,
I'm pretty sure there's a lot of science backing up trans identities. So,
woo! Oh god, yep.
This is obviously bullshit. It's anti-materialism to just ignore that.
Yeah, because materialism is any time a doctor or a scientist does anything. And it's like, oh shit, I had no idea that's how, like, unsophisticated your support of this idea was. Yeah, so I guess off the bat, one of my frustrations with the video is sort of they're not arguing the actual point. They're trying to, like, get Caleb in trouble for sitting next to the wrong person, essentially.
I'd be sitting alone in a lunchroom in high school if I wasn't sitting alone at a punk show in Asheville. Hey, hey, hey.
So instead of arguing the actual politics of it, which they can't do, aside from going, oh, I've heard there's some science, like, oh, fuck, man. Like, yeah, there is some science. There was science behind phrenology.
Of course you'd say that. You're the brain pan of a stagecoach tilter.
There was science behind lobotomies.
One of Freeman's many gifts, skills, was cultivating the media, and they reciprocated with a lot of very favorable coverage. Miracle cure to the brain, cutting the brain cures the soul. The media was all over it.
Which have a very, very similar history to gender reassignment surgery or sex reassignment surgery.
For years, this case was called a medical triumph, but in truth, the case was a failure, devastating the lives of just about everybody involved. This is David, who has remained anonymous until now.
They're getting the John Money story that has nothing to do with modern trans ideology.
Just in case they do suspect me.
There's no such thing as modern gender ideology.
It's a stereotype, and it's offensive. And you're the last person I would want to perpetuate it.
I'm pretty sure there's a lot of science backing up trans identities. So,
I present to you the lobotomy. In 1935, Portuguese neurologist Antonio Egas Moniz first attempted a procedure that I now wish to make commonplace. A procedure so straightforward, it can be performed on all 4 subjects in a quarter of an hour. The brain's frontal lobe is the seat of its neuroses: juvenile distraction, mania, memory loss, lesbianism.
Wow, just how, gender identity is massively overrepresented in homosexual and autistic youth. What a coincidence!
All of these maladies can be subdued, if not reversed, by surgically disrupting a series of neural connections in the brain's white matter.
He's a medical dude. So just hand those little wolverines over and stop worrying so much.
Trans identities, so
You should look it up before you start endorsing this shit.
I do not see why we cannot, how you say, experimentally circumcise our way out of a problem that was created by, how you say, experimental circumcision. After all, like Mama always say, the only thing that stops a bad doctor remodeling your genitals is a good doctor remodeling your genitals. Clearly, we have no choice but to destroy the sex in order to save it.
So, I was just editing in this cartoon parody of John Money when it occurred to me that he is yet another person intimately involved in the construction of gender identity and gender identity ideology as we know it today, who also was a pedophile. The medical experimentation that he conducted on David Raymer and his brother consisted of child sexual abuse, or didn't consist of it, but contained it. I mean, it basically consisted of it. And so not only, like Foucault, did he practice it, but he also advocated it. It says here on the Wikipedia entry for John Money, John Money participated in debates on chronophilias, especially pedophilia. He stated that both sexual researchers and the public do not make distinctions between affectional pedophilia and sadistic pedophilia. Money asserts that the affectional pedophilia was about love and not sex. Quote, "If I were to see a case of a boy aged 10 or 11 who's intensely erotically attracted towards a man in his 20s or 30s, if the relationship is totally mutual and the bonding is genuinely totally mutual, then I would not call it pathological in any way." Money held the view that affectional pedophilia is caused by a surplus of parental love that became erotic and is not a behavioral disorder. So they've just got pedos bursting from every nook and cranny. And Bad Empanada probably didn't know that. So he's like, hey, how come we can't point out the fact that this guy's obviously a pedophile? And it's like, because all these guys are obviously pedophiles.
You're acting like this is a spurious connection. So we're going to play Jeopardy. We're going to play Queer Theory Pedophilia Jeopardy. Okay, answer. Commonly called the godfather of queer theory.
Who is Foucault?
Who is Foucault? The author of the founding document of queer theory. Who is Gail Rubin? And since you're not believing me, quote, this is in the founding document of queer theory. Like communists and homosexuals in the 1950s, boy lovers are so stigmatized that it is difficult to find defenders of their civil liberties, let alone for their erotic orientation. That's in the founding document of queer theory.
Who wants to learn about how Michel Foucault was a pedophile? That is a fact. Michel Foucault,
the godfather of queer theory,
was not just a pedophile, but a sex tourist pedophile. Oh, he didn't just advocate for it. He did it. Now, there's a lot of elements here. Like, I've cited Foucault a few times in my videos, and I'm fine with that. You know, what he wrote doesn't really have anything at all to do with being a pedophile.
Boy lovers are so stigmatized that it is difficult to find defenders of their civil liberties, let alone for their erotic orientation. That's in the founding document of queer theory.
But there's some people who are very much attached to the image of like these figures, and they like turn them into like something larger than life, and they get extremely offended if you just basically talk about what are indisputable historical truths about them, which are...
Okay, here's something by Pat Califia. Pat Califia has written, any child old enough to decide whether or not she or he wants to eat spinach, play with trucks, or wear shoes is old enough to decide whether or not she wants to run around naked in the sun, masturbate, sit in someone's lap, or engage in sexual activity, by which she does not mean play doctor, she means with adults. She's very clear about that because she also says that pedophiles should be more and not less invested in children's lives. Okay, Judith Butler is the most famous queer theorist of the day. So Judith Butler wrote, so I keep adding this qualification, when incest is a violation, suggesting I think there may be occasions in which it's not. Why would I talk that way? Well, I do think that there are probably forms of incest that are not necessarily traumatic, or which gain their traumatic character by virtue of the consciousness of social stain that they produce. Yeah, that's Judith Butler. That's one of the queer heroes. The answer is queer theorist who has spoken out strongly against pedophilia.
Zero. Who is no one.
Who is no one, not a single one. Because the entire thing is based on transgressing. Yeah, I know, dear fucking God.
The claim of him fucking 17-year-old Tunisian kids is pretty much incontestably true. It's never been retracted. And honestly, the people who made that claim and the people and a lot of people in France defending Foucault don't seem to think it needs to be retracted because they seem to think that ephebophilia is okay, which is fucked up on its own and says a whole lot about France, that that's a valid defense. But for us normal people who aren't disgusting Frenchmen, it's clear that he was a pedophile. Open and shut case. If you don't like it, you know, don't shoot the messenger. It's not on me for telling you about it. So yeah, if you want to like try to frame it, like the first claim being retracted somehow changes everything here, and any other claim is also false. That's obviously not true. The second claim, the more grounded in reality one of him fucking 17-year-old boys in Tunisia is obviously true, regardless of how much Guy Sorman originally exaggerated the story and got the details wrong. It's up for you to grasp with that. It's not up to me. If you can't deal with it, if you want to lie about
queer theory,
it's your fault for idolizing
Professor ContraPoints
so much that you feel the need to defend their honor. Anyway,
queer theory.
This is fucking weird. That's the moral of the story.
So at this point, we can see that if Bad Empanada were to apply the same clear-headed reasoning that he is applying to Foucault, to many other leaders in queer thought and the development of the medicalized concept of gender identity, then it would be almost harder to find one that didn't advocate pedophilia than it was to find one that did. And so, in a sense, to just pick Foucault is almost like propaganda for postmodernism, because it makes postmodernism look way better than it actually is in terms of its track record of people advocating and practicing pedophilia, and also that being the basis of the foundation of sex reassignment surgeries that were originally performed on intersex children without their consent, in what most people today recognize as a violation of their human rights. And the same people are still doing the same thing. They're committing basically like a medicalized form of pedophilia. Before, if you wanted to hack up the genitals of children, you had to become a serial killer. But thanks to postmodernism, you can just open a gender identity clinic. They're permitting minors to make what are adult decisions, given that we have declared as a society a tattoo is a fucking adult decision. So surely castrating yourself or having a double mastectomy or sterilizing yourself through cross-sex hormones is an adult decision that probably a 9 or 10-year-old doesn't really have the mental capacity to make. And so for Bad Empanada to be like, oh, what's the connection between postmodernism and gender identity? It's all about blurring lines. It's the ideological expression of neoliberalism, where everything's a market. There's nothing can be uncommodifiable. And children not being able to consent to cosmetic medical procedures was an impediment to the market that a whole bunch of apparently socialist fuckwits helped them to get around and corporatize and commodify. But they will be chased out of the left if they don't consent to this. So, like Bad Empanada, he knows enough to be able to exist in the world. He can make a few funny jokes, sort of, but he doesn't really understand it. because it's not really comprehensible, because it's a weird pedo cult. And not only is it a weird pedo cult, but it's an openly violent weird pedo cult where men who are under the impression that they're women are allowed to like pose in public with weapons, threatening to beat up like elderly women who don't believe in postmodernism. And they're like, Antifa. So I don't think that's what Antifa like was about in Germany anyway, even though that's what it's become in the United States. Like, yeah, people do chicken shit to actually take on Nazis. They're like, I'm gonna go beat up my grandma instead. So yeah, they openly make death threats all the time. It's not a surprise. Like when J.K. Rowling gets death threats, no one's like, oh my god, who could be sending those death threats? Why would anyone be sending death threats? Everyone is so loving on our side. Everyone knows who it is. Trans activists left dead animals at the Vancouver rape relief shelter as a method of protesting, and not one mainstream NGO says shit ever about any of this insanity, because they're dependent on this political violence to maintain their political hegemony. If an academic can't even hold a position because they're going to be violently threatened out of their workplace by a small group of sex cultists, like I don't see how that's progressive. But unfortunately for Bad Empanada, it doesn't matter if it makes sense, because he's already in it, and he already has, I guess, a significant section of his fan base that are gender churches, like probably, 90s, 100%, 102% of them probably. And the thing that makes them different to other people is they're vengeful, like Scientologists. They have like TERF is basically their concept of suppressive person. So it's like, not only are you a non-believer, but your very existence is like a danger and a threat to everything we hold sacred. In a way that pedophilia clearly isn't. Like, you can have a whole library full of pedophiles, but you can't have a single TERF book on your shelf, because people might think something weird about you. So if he were to ever change his mind, he would instantly have, I don't know, however many hundreds or dozens or whatever it is of people accusing him of genocide, which would be hilarious. So all that information should kind of catch you up on this little skit I made where I mashed together a David Cross bit about Christianity, but changed all the references so it was about gender identity. And there's a little reference to the Vancouver rape relief thing. Professor ContraPoints gets a mention, all the good stuff. So yeah, what is Empanada going to do? Like, is he going to deny that queer theory is full of pedophiles? Is like, the apples didn't even fall off the pedophile tree? And is he going to allow himself to contemplate what that might mean for the fact that gender ideology and queer theory has allowed the medical industry to basically behave in a pedophilic, predatory way, in the same way that the leaders intended for it to do? Is that perhaps going to be a connection that's made? That would be wonderful.
That's one of my favorite things about
Professor ContraPoints.
Actually said this, I'm quoting. He actually said he hasn't made up his mind yet about...
So what is biological sex?
That is a tough one. I mean, on the one hand, you've got,
My name is Natalie. So I'm a YouTuber.
And everything.
I'm a YouTuber.
Says, and and then on the other hand, you've got facts. But did you guys read about the
Professor ContraPoints
asking
feminist activists
to pray for him? Did you hear that? You heard that? Oh, it's awesome. Oddly enough, happen to have it right here. Yeah, this is true. I got this on the internet.
Feminist activists
asked to pray for
Professor ContraPoints.
They may be the ones facing danger on the battlefield, but
feminist activists
are being asked to pray for
Professor ContraPoints.
I mean, that is the most fucking, like, imperialistic, like, egomaniacal thing. That's craziness. That's what kings do. Kings do that, you know? Was he fucking munching on a big old turkey leg and getting blown by a surf, you know? He's like, oh, tell the
women
to pray for the president.
My other guest tonight is Abigail Cockbane, feminist activist and author of The Trans Menace.
Lesbian genocide and the rape of feminism.
What?
Lesbian genocide.
Oh, yes, that's funny. What?
And the rape of feminism.
That's wonderful. You truly are the king of references. Oh. Okay, okay, check this out. The pamphlet produced by a group called...
We'll call the boy-man continuum, so...
Which is, you know, kind of an unfortunate name, you know. You know, don't you... You'd think somebody in the organization would be like, hey, guys... Hey, I was just thinking, you know, because, you know how so many...
Queer theorists.
Like to fuck little boys. I'm wondering if maybe, shouldn't we call it like Sunny Side Up or something like that? Now, check this out. Thousands of
feminist activists
have been given a pamphlet called
A Woman's
Duty, a mini prayer book which includes a tear-out section to be mailed to the White House, pledging the
feminist activist
who sends it in has been praying for
Professor ContraPoints.
Not only do you have to do it, but you have to fucking prove it. While you're at war. Yeah, I know, we've been getting a lot of lip service from you there.
It's the Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter.
But fucking put your money where your mouth is, asshole. But this is crazy. I mean, these kids, these poor fucking kids, like these 90-year-old kids who are fucking scared shitless. Yeah, pray, man, pray. Like, oh God, oh dear, I am committed to pray for you. Oh God, for your family and your staff, and during the, oh no, oh God, must finish prayer. God, please see to it that
Professor ContraPoints
has the strength to
menstruate out of my dick.
Please, thank you. But now I may die. All right. Thank you.
I will never go see stand-up comedy again. Well, we are sorry that you experienced that with our services.